live. Okay, good morning and welcome to the People Committee of the Scottish Police Authority. This is a regular standing meeting. Should I drop off the call, can I ask that Alistair Hayes steps in and chairs the meeting until I get reconnected? Is that okay, Alistair?
Yes.
I'd like to welcome colleagues from the trade unions, staff associations, and Her Majesty's Inspectorate for Constabulary. As a reminder to all attendees and for those who may be watching this live broadcast for the first time, to provide clarity at the outset that the papers are presented. We will take initial comments and questions from the Scottish Police Authority board members before I then bring in staff associations and union attendees to provide members with any wider perspective they may wish. Members will then be able to ask further questions following these comments and observations. I haven't received any members' apologies for today. Can I ask, in line with the formality of the meeting, are there any declarations of interest or connections to the business that's been notified today? None have been notified in advance. Okay, we note there is none intimated. The public minute from the meeting held on the 29th of May 2025 is circulated and invite members to agree the draft as an accurate record. Can we agree that? Thank you. That's noted. In terms of item 1.4, decisions taken since the last meeting of the committee, there's nothing to note. And then we move on to 1.5, which is the rolling action log and matters arising in terms of the public business of this committee, which is for approval. Looking at the action log, it's there. There is one item with the action number 2, the force mobilisation model. A briefing is being provided. It's not been able to get it circulated in time for this meeting, but we will do it, and it will be available on the web as well when it is available, and it will be appended to this action log when it is next presented. So in terms of the recommendations that are in the action log, the only other comment I've got is around the uniform and appearance policy review, which is proposed to close, but the wider SOP is not yet available, and I'm wondering can we close it without that being available, given the notice that this is addressing a judgment which was made against Northumbria's Chief Constable in relation to impartiality. So with those two exceptions, are we happy to agree with the recommendations in that action log?
Yes.
Thank you.
Mayor, can I just clarify then, are you content to close that, or would you like to keep it open until you...
I think we keep it going just now until we get a further update.
That's fine, I'll change that one. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, then we move on from the rolling action log. In item 1.6, decisions regarding taking business in private, in accordance with section 20 of the SPA standing orders, invite members to agree to take the agenda items 5 to 8 in private. Before we move to these items, I will close this meeting and ask for people to lead the call who are not involved in the private meeting. Is everybody content to take items 5 to 8 in private? Okay, members, thank you for that. Before I move to the next substantive agenda item, remind presenters actually that we have a busy agenda and members have had the papers to read, and therefore ask that your introductory remarks highlight anything that's not in your report or anything that has changed since the report was written, and that way we can make the best use of available time for members' questions and discussions. Give it, Rich. So we move on then to item 2.1 under wellbeing. It's the biannual Joint Health and Wellbeing and Health and Safety thematic report, and we've got Don McLean and Damien Shannon today. Don, can I ask you to present on that paper? Thanks.
Yes, thank you, Chair. On your wishes, I will keep this brief, given that the paper has been read. So just to go to our strategic plan on slide 3, section 1A, just to inform the members that the risk assessment post, or the risk assessor post that was put in place through a RIG bid, has been successful in the amount of significant work that has taken place to update our existing risk assessment templates, but also those which form part of the recent audits, which we will probably discuss later in my update. We're also doing some research as part of that strategic plan on any products or services through procurement frameworks in relation to digitising our health and safety management system. So we've started to investigate possible integration with other systems internally, but we don't seem to have anything that really meets what we need in terms of health and safety requirements. So we have actually now started to draft a paper to the transformation space to try and get some funding in that area. In terms of our internal audits that we've had recently, work continues to progress with the action plan for the dangerous goods, and we have our first meeting of that both internally with our colleagues, but also externally with partners next week to get that action plan in motion. We've recently had the health and safety management system audit. There was mention of some good practice, such as the changes with the certificate of assurance as an example, but we've also had some limited feedback from that. However, I am confident as the lead for health and safety that we can achieve the recommendations being asked, and this has been through ARAC and comments have been taken on board. Just to give you an overview of the certificate of assurance, which you can see some information on in regard to slide 11. The theme this year is leadership. I have spoken to all divisional commanders at the recent meeting to give them an overview of what the expectation is on that. We're looking to identify whether or not they understand their responsibilities in terms of health and safety, but we're also looking to support any gaps and challenges from a health and safety perspective with compliance. So far we've completed about 11 of those. We've got 6 more to go next month, and I'll keep the board updated with progress and any interim information we get from that. Moving on to training just quickly, really pleased to read in the papers that there's plans for a pilot on protected time for learning, because as you can see, we're kind of below where we need to be with fire awareness training. So really appreciate that we've had an exceptionally busy summer, but hopefully that will improve once officers and staff can get a focus back on things like that. And a huge thanks to my team for the work that they've been doing and getting the other legacy training figures reduced. As you could see from the information in the slides, we've seen a significant reduction in the number of people waiting to be trained. And we've, in addition to that training, we've developed some very short video toolbox talks on the pertinent topics and themes that we've found, including near-miss reporting and the importance of that. Doing some benchmarking, as I noticed that we were only sitting at 7% for that, but other forces are averaging at about 12%, albeit that's not great either, but we are significantly below the average. So we've done some communication around those toolbox talks to highlight that. In terms of the accident incident near miss information, you'll see that there's been a significant increase in RIDDOR reports on the same time last year during arrest and custody. And so we are doing some work in that space with OST to identify if there's anything there that we can help to improve on that. And just to finalise my update, there was a significant increase in the number of reports in G Division last quarter, And this was due to a pilot that we were running, where we sent an email to everyone who reported acknowledging their submission and providing that information to encourage future reporting. Our advisor for that area, for G Division, Alice Murdoch, also did some significant work alongside the YSM champion, which also helped, we think, to improve overall reporting rates. And a paper has been drafted in relation to that pilot so that we can share it nationwide around the force. And that's all from me, Chair. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much for that. Members can offer it for questions just now. Okay, I see Alistair Hay had his hand up. Can come to you, Alistair. You're on mute.
Sorry. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Don. A very full, comprehensive report. There's no doubting from reading this report, you know, the commitment to improve health, safety and wellbeing across Scotland. So I'm appreciative for that. I've got a couple of areas that I wanted to just ask you about. One is in relation to assaults on police staff and police officers, and I think from the report I picked up that custody is a particularly an area where this occurs quite frequently. But I also asked about this at the board last week, and one of the questions, part of the response I got in relation to it was around the challenges for police officers and police staff working in rural Scotland. So you know, from the work that you're doing, I was just wondering, you know, what your thoughts are, how that's fed into training, leadership, equipment, etc., etc. You know, around reducing assaults, but particularly within custody, particularly within rural Scotland. And my second question was around near-miss reporting. You know, I note the downward trend there. If I'm being honest, ever since I've started looking at health and safety reports, there's been a struggle to get people to provide near-miss reports. And I don't know if that's bureaucracy behind it, but the benefits of it and the learning that's available from it, the strong evidence that is very positive. So just wondering what other steps you're taking to that. And you referenced leadership, and I wondered if there was thoughts around leadership in terms of near-miss reporting. So that's a couple of questions I've got at the moment. Thank you.
Don, do you want to respond to that?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Alistair. Yeah, assaults, especially in custody, it is one of those areas where what we do is we definitely do a deep dive, and we look at whether there are any sort of significant trends or patterns, and we do have a very good relationship with our OST team, and we feed that in, and they've been really responsive to the information, and they do genuinely tend to include anything that we think is required in terms of upping the necessary need to train. It's worth reassuring the board as well that all of our staff that work within custody get the same level of officer safety training. So there is no difference there in terms of what they receive. So we are constantly looking at that data, but we need the data to be fed into us, which is another part of your question there, Alistair, around near-miss reporting and the importance of that. And we really do have to do some work around making people understand the need for that data so that we can improve. But we're hoping to do that through our SOP that's going through the passport policy process at the moment on accident, incident, near miss, but also through this short toolbox talk that we have recently provided to help people understand the importance of reporting. It's not about how to report this toolbox talk. This toolbox talk is why it's important to do so. Yeah. In terms of the rural areas, I really haven't got anything to come back to you with on that specifically, but it's certainly something I can take away and look at and come back to the board on. And yes, I'm really keen for leaders, and I'm really grateful that I do get the opportunity from time to time to go into divisional commanders meetings and talk to them about various things that we are, seeing areas that need to be addressed, such as near miss reporting. So the themes that come out of this certificate of assurance will be really interesting and will again give us a focus as to where we need to put our priorities.
Alistair, do you want to come back on that? And thanks, Dawn, for undertaking to come back regarding the rural aspect of Alistair's question. Alistair?
Yeah, I'm really appreciative of the work that's going on. Hopefully I put that across, and that the work you're doing to continually improve, so the way you're connecting into the wider organisation, I feel assured on that. If Chair, I've got one more question, if you don't mind.
Yep, follow through.
So this one, Dawn, is on your health and wellbeing action plan update. Huge amount of work going on there, and there's RAG status, and there's a number of areas in there that are currently red, and there is an update there. But I was just wondering, because all of them are important, so I don't want to pick any individual one out. If things fall into red, what are the challenges behind that? Is it resourcing within the department? Is it other priorities? And what's your thoughts on how you would bring these back into the timeline that you'd hoped to originally achieve?
Alistair, I can pick up on that part in terms of the health and wellbeing aspect of the report. So
Thanks,
for us, in terms of the resourcing element, as of Friday, as we enter into kind of the new structure within HR department, we'll have additional resource and capacity joining us, which will be significant in terms of HR advisors and administrator. And we've also got 2 HR manager positions that we're going to appoint. So over the course of the next 4, 6, 8 weeks, we'll have a significant increase in terms of capacity to address those specific areas, to own those specific areas, and to push them forward. So I'm very hopeful by the next time that we come back to the board that everything will be in motion in terms of the action plan as it's been assigned to new team members.
Yeah, Chair, thank you. That's really encouraging, and I'm glad you're now moved to that position. And I think that the fact that you have got that additional resource and it's been promoted, supported within the organisation, is a strong indication that the priority that health and wellbeing has been given within Police Scotland. So thank you. That's me, Chair. Thanks very much.
Thanks for that. I'll bring in trade union and staff association colleagues at the conclusion of all members' questions. Can I move now to Angela Lynch, please?
Thanks, Chair. To some extent, Alistair's covered it, but maybe I can just look for a wee bit more assurance here. I'm just wondering about the number of outstanding recommendations that there are. And Damien, that was useful to hear about the additional resources that are coming into this area. But in terms of not just the update that you've got, but there were significant challenges in the internal audit report that went to ARAC a week or so ago. I'm wondering, is there a plan to look at prioritising those so that we can actually see progress on some of the ones that are most significant in terms of addressing some of the real concerns about health and safety across the organisation? And I'm just wondering whether or not that recruitment is well underway, when will we actually see a revised plan in terms of pulling all the recommendations together? Because they're a wee bit disparate in where you find them.
Yeah, so happy to come in on the health and wellbeing specific ones. Dawn, you might touch on the others. In terms of the recommendations from the HMICS audit, absolutely, I think the capacity will give us that greater ability to be able to deliver on those. There's a lot of kind of interdependencies with them as well in terms of collaborating with other areas. We feel that in terms of prioritising, we have closed off two in recent weeks, and we really set those as a priority. But I think for us with the capacity, we would like to think that we can treat them all as priorities in terms of having that increased resource to be able to deliver upon them. Some of them really for us in terms of that collaboration piece, I think that's the bit that we really need to drive forward. The message that we were hearing through the HMICS inspection was that, you know, health and wellbeing isn't just a health and wellbeing matter. As you will see in some of the recommendations, we've got RDU estates included in that as well. So really that collaboration piece, being able to influence in that space and be able to have that additional capacity and resource is going to be beneficial in pushing all of them forward. We're currently revising the timelines on them to align with the restructure and the capacity joining us. So for us, we'll really have a better realistic picture of when we will achieve those kind of moving forward.
Julie, any follow-ups from you?
So it'd be really good because some of the actions that are outstanding refer to a potential restructuring within health and safety, and there are no timelines associated with it, Chair. I just wondered, is there work to augment the team, or is there a reprioritisation within the current resources?
Dawn, would you like to pick up on that one?
Yeah, so there is. I don't know if the fact that our paper is a joint paper. There is nothing in health and safety in regards to restructure. I don't know if you're maybe relating to health and wellbeing in this space. Certainly from my perspective in terms of audit recommendations, we have now devised an internal working group in terms of the dangerous goods stuff, and much like Damien, we are relying on our internal colleagues to support some of the findings to action those recommendations, but there is no plans to restructure health and safety as it stands at the moment.
Thank you, Dawn. Sorry, that's my misunderstanding.
It's okay, no, it's important to clarify it. You did touch on the states related issues in terms of health and safety, health and well-being, and not just being about the people, but looking at the issues around RAC, and previously we've had Legionella traces, etc. Where exactly are those updates reported then, if we're talking about health and safety here? Dawn, can you clarify?
Yes, Chair. That all goes to Health and Safety Board. So there is an Estates and Risk Compliance Board that myself and others within estates sit on, and we go through all the work that has been done in those areas, such as water risk management, asbestos, RAC, etc. And then that report is then fed into the Health and Safety Board.
And in terms of the formal governance of the SPA, would you expect that to come here eventually? Or
ideally, yes, because I do think that, you know, there is we intertwine health and safety with estates and with our colleagues in health and wellbeing. So I think that would be beneficial.
So going forward then, in terms of your report, if we could look towards integrating that side of it into the formal reporting as well, please. Would that be reasonable?
But we would need to reach out to our colleagues in estates for that clarification.
Yeah, but can we take an action for a discussion on this with SPA officials as well, regarding how we, I mean, just take the conversation around health and well-being, and then the issues that we're talking there, the interrelation of it is so clear that it's important that we get that information. I see Director Miller's put her hand up. Maybe she wants to come in on this.
Thank you. I was just going to point out that we do have a new head of estate joining on Monday of next week. So there might be an opportunity once she's had a chance to have a few weeks induction for a conversation around that.
Okay, thanks very much. And the other thing, before we move on to others, is around the importance in terms of the wider organisational health and safety culture. So if those issues aren't all coming in at the one time, we clearly don't get the opportunity to reinforce that. I see DCC Spears has put his hand up.
Thanks, Tom. If it helps you avoid an action, obviously I've got responsibility for estates as well as health and safety, and the matters I've just discussed dock into a couple of boards. So they dock into the Health and Safety Board, which I chair, they dock into the Finance and People Board. So I think your desire to get that data here, I'm happy to commit to do that. So we will bring that to your next meeting. I'm happy that we do that.
I'm grateful to you. Thanks. Thank you for that. Deborah, just you've got a hand up.
Yeah, Chair. It was just to suggest that before we move to comments and observations from our Staff Association Trade Union colleagues, maybe we'd want to go back and ask Damien to do a brief overview of his part of this thematic paper, which brings together the wellbeing and the health and safety. And it just, because I know some members' questions are straying into that area as well. So if we could do that as a whole and then go to colleagues for their observations, if that might help things a little bit.
Thank you. Damien, are you okay with that?
Yes, I'm happy to do that. I think I'll focus on the health and wellbeing activity piece just at the end of the paper. So just to touch on some of the data and highlights that we've provided. So in terms of occupational health, you can see the consistency in terms of referral numbers across the period with over 1,300 referrals made. The MyOH portal and the introduction of the portal has been something that has benefited in terms of the efficiency around and tracking of referrals, and it's something we're always looking to increase the awareness of. In terms of other analysis that we're doing currently around occupational health, we're looking at that average time to refer, and obviously trying to decrease that from the incident or anything that takes place in terms of absence until how we get them into the system in terms of occupational health. And that's really a desire that will help us with early identification of issues, implement interventions, proactive approach, and in a bid to reduce that long-term absence and sickness around that. The physiotherapy is also an area we've been looking at. Obviously, in terms of absence figures, we can see a correlation around musculoskeletal and absence as well. And we've been taking a closer look at our criteria around that and how we can maybe amend that in a clinical fashion to allow people to enter into physiotherapy more readily. So that's an undertaking in terms of that criteria that's ongoing. Your wellbeing assessment is our mental health MOT, and very much a kind of a framework in terms of proactive and preventative activity that we're encouraging everybody to do in terms of checking in on themselves. We can see the numbers are nearly at 1,000 in terms of those that have completed it since January, with follow-up for anybody that comes in terms of being amber or red, and you can see the outcomes of those approaches. This is a tool that we're really trying to promote and push towards all members of staff and officers to ensure that they have that awareness of their own mental health and well-being, and there is the option of support and pathway to support readily available to them. Lastly, just in terms of our employee assistance programme, some data provided there in terms of the referrals into the system and new clinical usage that we have. The number of clinical sessions ever increasing in terms of our EMDR and our CBT, which is those more trauma focused therapies that we have added to the spec in the last 12 months. And then in terms of the outcomes of the therapy, and you can see that we have positive change in 42.9%, with others 55% in terms of that minimal change. But that is the time that it takes people to see the influence of therapy, and it can take a little bit longer for others. What we do have now within the spec of our contract is that if additional sessions are required for individuals, they can make a request to have those approved, and that is something and an avenue that we've seen being readily used at this moment in time. So just some key areas in terms of activity. The action plan is also included there, which we're trying to make as a stream across everything that we do. It reflects the HMICS recommendations as well. And as I've already just touched on, in terms of capacity around our restructure, we can really see ourselves moving forward in the coming weeks and months and against the delivery of that plan. Happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Damien. That's really helpful. Any further questions to Damien at the moment? Angela?
Thank you, and thanks, Damien. That is really helpful. I was going to raise it under Your Voice Matters because it's one of the elements of feedback to the staff, but it's probably more relevant here. I think it's to be commended just the range of assistance that has been offered and the support for employees across the service. So I think that's terrific. What I'm wondering, I think in the paper on Your Voice Matter, it talks about 17 million is now being spent on these range of interventions. What types of evaluation are being undertaken to demonstrate the impact of them and what works well in different circumstances? How are we assessing what learning are we taking from the intervention so that it informs future resource planning?
Thank you. It's a great question in terms of that's the challenge that we have around health and well-being, around impact, and everything that we do should have that impact, and we should be able to determine whether it is or whether it's not making it. The basis of the action plan and moving forward was an independent review that we had done by an external organisation called ThriveWise, which also was bolstered by what we've done with HMICS. The thing that they've challenged us to do within is to ensure that we have that impact through our data, and we're trying to have that in every stream of the action plan, and as you say, every offering. But also within the action plan, we plan to do a benchmarking tool in terms of the whole range of the health and wellbeing programme. There is tools out there in terms of the blue light framework. So we plan to undertake that in the next 6-month period to really get that benchmarking against all aspects of it, and then develop our understanding of data analysis, engaging with our new area within HR in terms of data insights, to ensure that we have the mechanisms to understand the impact. As you can see in the data that we've presented, we're trying to get deeper into that in terms of trying to understand pathways, outcomes, etc. And in terms of health and wellbeing, the 3 areas that we've really been looking at is around referrals and how engagement and how the number of people that are accessing our services at the right time, around outcomes, so such as we've displayed around outcomes after therapy, but also the outcomes after management referrals or anything into occupational health. And then also we've included within the Your Voice Matters survey, the World Health Organization subjective wellbeing measure, which is really important to us in terms of giving us an annual measure around the impact. It's 5 simple questions that we can pulse and survey in any area of the business at any time, but for us, it gives us a benchmark we can work off on an annual basis.
Thanks, Chair. It would be good to, at some point, just to see that somewhere so that we could see just how different interventions are supporting staff and officers. Thank you.
Thanks for that. I see a couple of hands up. I know that Director Miller, you had your hand up. It's going down now. Just was that a legacy hand? Just in case you want to come in on this.
It was to call out the World Health Organization. But hopefully, Angela, an example would be in the Appendix 10C, where you can start to see that the team are able to really drill down into impact. So that 10C is specifically around clinical outcomes and the difference that some of that very bespoke therapeutic intervention is making for colleagues. So we're getting smarter in that space in terms of what's the difference.
And I've no doubt if we follow through in the request of a deeper dive into this in the future, the opportunity we can explore that further. So thanks. Barry Donachie from the Insights team, you've got your hand up.
Thanks, Chair. Just really going to come in and sort of validate what Damien was saying there. Hopefully, I think it demonstrates that the survey is that kind of golden thread through all people-centric activity. But as Damien alludes to, we are asking the WHO5 questions that gives that kind of instant measurement of people's well-being. We're supplementing it in this year's survey with an additional question to understand what the drivers of why people have responded that way. Is it a work issue? Is it something that's maybe more personal? So we can start to really build up a better picture of people's well-being across the service. In terms of that sort of sustained and ongoing measurement piece, and I'm maybe stealing Leslie's thunder a little bit from our paper that's coming up, but we're close to concluding a procurement exercise that will get us essentially a colleague engagement platform that's agile, that's alive, that will enable us to do that pulsing capability that Damien mentioned. So it's not just going to be an annual measurement of people's well-being and how they're feeling, their kind of sentiments. We'll be able to do that far more agilely. If there's key issues, if there's operational issues, that we can really lean into divisions who are affected by that and in the moment get a sense of their well-being and other key people focused activities. So just wanted to share that, Chair. Thank you.
It's really helpful. It's an insight to what's coming up. Alistair Hay.
Thanks, Chair. Damien, I'm really encouraged by the work you're doing on mental health overall, and you highlighted the mental health MOT, where there's nearly a 1,000 people within Police Scotland have come forward and used that. But it does highlight that it says that over 50% of the people that have used that have got red and amber areas, and there's onward referrals and there's support detailed within that. So it kind of leads me to think about capacity, because 1,000 people is great, but Police Scotland is a significantly bigger organisation than that. So as people use this through your encouragement, are you confident that there will be capacity to give people the support if they need it?
Yeah, so the Your Wellbeing Assessment is delivered through our occupational health provider. So the challenge to them is to be able to meet that requirement. It's something we monitor on a monthly and quarterly basis in terms of the tool and the engagement with the tool. So it's forever something we're monitoring to ensure that we have a good cadre to follow up in terms of affiliates and counsellors, etc. But that is the providers, and we can hold them to account in terms of delivery of that. I think for us, as you've said, the more people we can get using these tools, the better. So I would see it as probably being a good challenge if we get to that place around the capacity that we have more people, and we can certainly look to keep a close eye on that as we move forward.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much.
Okay, so there's been significant discussion around the areas around the health and safety and the well-being there. Can I invite colleagues from our unions and staff associations if they've got any insights they wish to offer at this stage? I've got the hand up from Stuart Carroll from the Superintendents Association.
Thanks, Chair. Firstly, just to say our experience of the consultation with Dawn, with Alan and others has been really positive. Some of the challenges I think we face at the senior leadership level is the churn of senior leaders. We've seen a lot of people exiting the service over the last few years. So what we are hoping to see is a sort of consistent approach, again, as part of the leadership training, right down through the ranks, that people are being trained in these health and safety and wellbeing skills on promotion. And that is then sustained through the different ranks. It's a sort of peculiarity that if you are the senior officer in a police building, you're responsible for everything. So it's welcome that estates is getting a boost as well. There's going to be a new head of estates, because quite often a senior police officer really doesn't have control over a budget around health and safety matters for estate, but they are responsible for it and they accept that responsibility. But the training piece is really important. The second thing, just to pick up on what Mr. Hay was asking about regarding assaults on police and police staff, I think the officer safety training programme has come on leaps and bounds. There's been good investment in it, investment in training for confined spaces, because typically it's the flashpoints around custody suites where somebody realises they're going to be put into a cell, or perhaps a search is about to uncover something, drugs that they've previously kept hidden, that leads to these flashpoints. We're going through currently a review of the stop and search code of practice, which will look at these issues. We've also, as a matter of policy, said that all prisoners don't need to be held now. There's legal advice around their rights. So it's things like that can sometimes work against the hard work that's been done in officer safety training, to say to people that the greatest risk is removing somebody from a van, taking somebody into the custody suite, taking somebody along the corridor to the cell. So it's good that Dawn's team, they're looking at where these particular points are, just to reinforce again the importance. And the last thing to say is for rural policing, and there's probably somebody in the call who's got more experience having been up in the Highlands and Islands than I do, but that shows, I think, the importance of investment. Where assistance is not coming quickly for our officers, they need to have the right equipment. They probably prefer to have a cell van or a van where a prisoner can be put in safely, rather than transporting them by a car. And it's these sort of things that we've been talking about in the meeting. So the consultation is good, the training is improving, and we're fully behind that.
Thanks for that. Sure, there's a number of issues there that I've no doubt those in the call will be reflecting on. Brian Jones from the Federation.
Yes, thanks, Chair. It's just to give you some degree of comfort to the committee that in relation to officer safety training, the use of force monitoring group have always been closely monitoring a number of assaults, and they've brought in new training methods where training can actually be brought to divisions on the ground at the start of shifts to make people fully aware of how they can be exposed into violent conditions. I'm glad that you highlighted yourselves about the concerns of estates, because obviously that's still one of the concerns of the Scottish Police Federation, and whether the funding is suitable to maintain the number of buildings we currently have. We do know that the numbers, not to rehearse the figures here, Chair, but we've talked about this for long and weary now about sufficient funding to ensure we can maintain this Victorian estate that we have in Police Scotland. But apart from that, there's no other observations just now, Chair, from the SPF. Thank you. Thanks
for that, Brian. In relation to estates, I'm sure you are aware and reinforcing it, that's an area of real importance for the SPA board and the leadership of Police Scotland. So that's a point we've made. The sort of final one for myself on this before we draw the item to conclusion is the internal audit findings that indicated a lack of wider organisational health and safety culture in the areas that we're talking here, the investment in health and safety, the investment in health and wellbeing, the investment in estates, etc. And also for those staff associations and the representatives that are on the call, that area of culture is something that it will only come about if we're obviously visible on this as well. So this committee would like to see some emphasis on that culture aspect going forward. Any other points in this paper that's important before we move off it? Dawn, you've put your hand up.
Thank you, Chair. Just very briefly to say that there is a paper that should be coming hopefully soon in regards to leadership training and what that might look like in future. So just to give some assurance there to Stuart.
That's helpful, Dawn. Thanks for that. Okay, so that's item 2.1 concluded in terms of its discussion. We move to item 2.2. Your Voice Matters, the forward look report. Leslie Webber, Head of Strategy, Insight and Engagement. Leslie, can I hand over to yourself?
Thank you very much, Chair. Yes, Also, good to meet everybody. I just started with Police Scotland last month. I've head of strategy, insight and engagement. It's really good to be here. I know some of you and getting to know everybody else. Thank you. So I'll take the paper as read, as you mentioned at the start of the meeting, just provide an update on key matters. It's already been mentioned, the sort of crucial nature of a workforce survey and how the survey helps us as a service to listen to our staff and act on what they're telling us to improve their experience and also to better support the front line. As you'll know from our former surveys and going back to 2021, we've been aiming to have a more balanced and proportionate approach. And so this biannual report reflects the nature of the approach that we've been taking, and I hope that it demonstrates our commitment to understanding how change is felt and what further support and what further supportive action we can take. So we're really happy to say that the survey launched successfully. It's now live and it will be open until the 29th of September. We're also really pleased with the response rate so far. On Monday, we gave an update to the Chief Officer team, which provided details of the completion rate of 21%. That's higher than this time last year by over 1.5%. And as of close of business yesterday, almost a quarter of the organisation had responded, so just over 24%. The core question that's been set remains the same as the last survey, and the reason for this is because it will enable us to measure change, and you'll see from the report that there's a visual representation of how we'll show that, and that's in Appendix B. As Barry just mentioned, under the previous agenda item, we've repurposed and revised some of the questions, and we hope that that will allow us to identify opportunities to improve our approach and also elicit a lot more actionable data from the insights. We've also undertaken a programme of engagement which will continue, and that includes with our trade unions and staff associations, and that's happened in advance of the survey launch, and it will continue, the dialogue will continue with them throughout this and afterwards. Last week, the Chief Constable also sent out over 1,800 letters to those who are currently not in work, where it was appropriate to make contact, and that letter is encouraging them to respond to the survey. We're working with the SPA and forensics at the moment to emulate the same approach. So we hope that board members can see that it demonstrates that we really are committed to support our staff and people to connect to the survey, its purpose and its mechanism to deliver change. Barry did just mention that we're also on our way to procuring a dedicated engagement platform, which we really hope will enable us to be more agile and alive to capturing the colleague feedback. I can't say a huge amount more at the moment because procurement is underway, but we hope to bring a full update to the People Committee in the short term. Just want to say a really big thank you to Barry Donachie and Kirsty Clyde, who have been leading on this work. And Barry, thank you for being here today also to take any questions and feedback. We're both here to take that. So I'll hand that back to the room.
Thanks, Leslie. And obviously, just to reinforce what you've said there to Barry and colleagues for the work in this in the background. Thanks for your commitment and supporting this committee as well. Colleagues can ask, is there any questions at this stage? Angela?
So again, forgive me, this might be something that the committee's seen prior meetings. It's good to see some of the actions that have been undertaken, and I think firstly we should commend the work of the team in actually undertaking the survey. It's really, really important. I'm interested in some of the measures. So in terms of that demonstrating, you said we listened type of thing, we need to make sure that we're really targeting communications to different teams and how, what the responses from those teams were. So I'm wondering how nuanced the plans are that then followed the survey of last year, so that we can actually see, because you mentioned quite rightly that you want to analyse the trends and hopefully improvements over the last year. How will you assure yourselves and assure us that the interventions, the communication or the actions that you undertook have actually hit the mark, not just at an organisational wide level, but at that more local level as well, where some of the issues might be quite different and nuanced?
Thanks, Angela. I'll come in just on a couple of items there. So one area that, of course, that we need to look at is benchmarking from previous survey results and benchmarking from what we're undertaking now. It's one of the reasons that we've got an independent supplier to better help us understand how we compare, and also how we compare with other bodies and organisations as well, so we can improve and do things better. We also do have quite a comprehensive communication strategy in place, which also supports line managers and area commanders to communicate with the staff in their particular areas to engage with the survey, and also to look back on the previous responses. So we hope that through this it can actually provide that force-wide support around working closely with managers and with staff to drive to participation, but to also be able to provide details of what happened from the former survey results and where we intend to take the new results from the survey. Barry, I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that.
Yeah, I wouldn't fall out with anything you've said there, Leslie. I think one of the things we asked in last year's survey was, how do you want to be communicated with? So essentially, we've got a kind of starter for 10 of how we get that narrative out there in terms of, you said we did. I think there's also an element of, we need to change our approach to how we communicate about, improvement in relation to the survey, and be quite honest with our workforce, and actually manage expectations about what's achievable and when, rather than having a kind of broad plan out there that just says we're going to do everything in 1 year. It's just not going to happen that way. So I see the survey, it sits in tandem with the 3-year plan, the 2030 vision. And I think we need to be quite kind of incremental in terms of, what is it we're focusing on? This is what we think you've told us is about, we need to improve. This is the activity we're doing. Here are some of the bits that are going to take a bit longer. So it's not a case of we're not doing it. It's just we're prioritizing X, Y, and Z. So I think that's it. The measurement piece, that's the tricky thing. We want to know quickly if actually this action activity we're doing is actually landing. We will need to wait and see what we get from the survey. I think the results in November. What's not maybe covered in the paper that's really, really important is there's a huge amount of work at divisional and local level to respond to their specific results. So I think it'd probably useful to bring something to this committee in the next couple of months about what that kind of local activity looks like. So it's that kind of joined up of, the work that the chief, the exec are leading, but also locally, those more nuanced improvement areas, what that looks like. Also harnessing good practice as well. How do we sort of share that right across the service? What good looks like, what's working well. So there's real opportunities, and I think we need to look at this as a 3-year minimum to do this survey annually, and reflect and take time and deliver improvement, deliver communications, and just keep our people really close to what it is we're doing, what we're seeking to achieve, but having them play it back to us as well. Thanks.
Thanks for that. I see we've got DCC Spears put his hand up. Alan, could I ask you to?
Yeah, thank you. I just probably wanted to build a little bit on Barry's comment. So lessons learned from the survey we did back in 2021 was that we created that you said we did. And, candidly, I felt as though as an organisation, we were sort of meeting ourselves coming backwards. And we didn't really acknowledge that some of the views that was expressed in that survey were quite local or they were territorial. And I think what's different about the survey that we did last year was that every commander, head of department, business lead had the data that was relevant to their business area. And one of the things we wanted to do was be much more empowering about them translating the data for their areas and making progress. So I think that becomes something that's quite different. So some of the benefits or results of that may or may not be realised in the survey results from this year. But there may be something to Angela's question that we could bring something back. But I get a sense of having talking to business leads and commanders they've got data that's relevant to their business area, which allows them to really address some of the comments, and that's reflective in my business area where I'm looking at my own portfolio. So the disaggregation of results of the survey is very different from it's been in previous years.
That's really helpful. I think the sort of broader question here is around the analysis of what it's telling us. There's things there around by division and departments. We know that these are in the HMICS review of culture. It brings out these sort of things. There's difference between culture, how police staff and police officers experience the organisation, and then obviously very importantly how different characteristics of the groups experience the organisation. So is there an opportunity to, in this upcoming survey, to drill into that and give us that insight across those areas of reference there?
Yeah, absolutely. That's part of the design, Tom, is to enable that capacity to really drill into the data. While not identifying individuals, we obviously have to adhere to confidentiality, but we want to use the data for it to be really purposeful so that we can drill into those nuances, to those sort of nooks and crannies of the organisation to understand lived experience. And crucially, as Leslie said, it's about delivering improvements, about delivering action that's evidence-based. So absolutely. And I think with every year we do this survey, we'll be able to flex a little bit more and dig a little bit deeper as we get more comfortable with the questions, get more comfortable with the data that we're working with. So I think there's real potential there, Chair.
Yeah, that's real encouraging, and frankly, we would expect to see that going forward. It's in response to recommendations and areas for improvement that have been highlighted in a number of reviews, etc. So if we could undertake and the feedback on the survey that's been done, that we get that analysis and it comes to this committee, that would be really important, because culture is a huge priority for this group. Are there any comments or questions to come? I see ACC Peyton has put her hand up before we go to union staff officials.
Thanks, Chair. Just a quick point, just again to give you that reassurance that, as you'll see in the report that the interim report we'll be discussing later, as part of the piecing together performance and task, and we pull together all of that information so that we're pulling together the qualitative and quantitative data, and that includes the survey, particularly as it relates to the things that you've mentioned, Chair, around elements of protected characteristics and areas where we do want to look to see is there any disproportionality. So it will also be reported in through those structures, and certainly be very mindful of any exceptions where we see that. So it's just to give that added reassurance.
That's great. Thanks for that. Okay, our colleagues from union staff associations, any insights or questions that you have at this point? Okay. It seems to have been very informative. If there's any points anybody wants to raise as we go through the agenda, references back to this, I'd be quite happy to hear that. Can we move on then to the section 3 around strategy, policy and planning, and the 3.1 is our update for discussion on the Q1 Workforce Strategic Dashboard. Katie Miller, the Director for People and Development.
Thanks, Chair. So this is the Q1 financial year dashboard, so a little bit of a look back. I genuinely am not going to comment on this other than to say that it's our standard reporting aligned to the 3 strategic objectives within the Strategic Workforce Plan and the People Strategy. We will iterate these dashboards now that we have a data and insight team in our new HR model. We will be looking at how we can iterate these and take these forward, but happy to take any questions.
That's very helpful. Colleagues, is there questions? Paul Eady.
Yeah,
Apologies, Katie, but what I'm looking at the dashboard. What does PQ stand for again?
Period 2.
Sorry?
P2.
Oh, no, PQ.
Oh, PQ, the quarter, the period quarter.
Oh, right,
period
sorry.
yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm living life by death by 1,000 acronyms.
Sorry.
So I'm just looking at the re-rostered rest days, because that does look down on the past year. So is the bank balance, is that what we should be looking at in terms of where we are at the year to date or where we are at the moment? Sorry if it sounds like a dumb question. But
No, so one of the key pieces that we'll look at is the bank re-rostered rest days and re-rostered rest days that have been cancelled, which is the important thing for us as an organisation, to make sure that our officers are getting that time out that they should be getting.
Right, and where is the re-rostered rest days cancelled on this?
They are.
Sorry
no, that's fine. I think we reported them in the narrative in the previous dashboards. If we've not included that in the narrative for these, then I can make sure that we bring something forward on that.
Is it an improvement? Is where I'm coming from. And
I would suspect, although I would need to look at the previous quarter, I would suspect that we've not seen a significant improvement in that. I'm wondering if Deb Spears, have you had any comments in relation to re-rostered rest days and cancellation?
I think our primary concern is that the volume of events that we policed over the summer, and really practical and simple terms, has seen a significant increase in our re-rostered rest days banks. We have a policy in place about how quickly we would want individuals to be taken, though, but there's a trend, unfortunately, over the summer where we've seen examples of officers and staff's inability to take their toil, and we've seen a real hike in the number of re-rostered rest days. So I think it's really important that we present to this committee the data around that, and I don't at my fingertips have that volume, but we have been looking at that over the course of the last couple of weeks.
Okay, perhaps next time, Chair, or if we can get a briefing note between now and the next meeting, that might be helpful. Short briefing. I
also suspect if we get to quarter 2, that the impact of the summer will be even more apparent, so it'll be helpful to do that.
So at least we'd be informed when we're questioning next time. Yeah. Okay, thanks, Chair.
Okay. Further questions from colleagues? I've got one myself in relation to acting in temporary ranks, where there was an ambition to be less reliant on that, but actually the trend is still upwards. Is there any sense of what the challenge is there?
Yes, but perhaps we might get onto this when we talk through some of the strategic workforce planning and people strategy in relation to moving to target operating model and some of the work that's underway there. Okay. If that's okay.
Yeah, we'll pick it up there.
Thank you.
Alistair Hay. Alistair, unfortunately, your video is not on my screen, so I can't see you, but I do see you're still on mute if you're still wanting to come in now.
Sorry, I was just struggling there, just toggling between different screens. Apologies for that. Just a couple of questions from me. One is in relation to absent rates in the organisation, which are fairly stable, but there is a lot of work, as we've heard earlier in this meeting, to support people, to encourage them to come back to work, the health and safety, the well-being, all these activities. So I'm just wondering if there is an expectation that there will be progress, or is all this work helping us to maintain that stability? And my second question was in relation to the number of people that complete exit surveys within the organisation. and appreciate that most people leaving are leaving through retirement, but it's an invaluable source of information to understand what's happening in the organisation, alongside, you know, the staff surveys like Your Voice Matters. So I'm just wondering about joining that type of information together.
Yeah, thank you. So you're right in that the absence for both short-term absence and long-term absence have remained fairly static, and the thematic reasons for that do tend to say fairly static as well, and actually would represent and reflect, I think, broader benchmarking that we do either within policing, blue light, or broader public services. We continue, as do other organisations, to see stress, depression, mental fatigue, etc., being the underlying reason, particularly for long-term absence. So in the health and wellbeing action plan that Damien talked to earlier, the 3 lenses that he looks through in his action plan are undo, so that we know regrettably harm happens. So in the moment, how do you undo that or support? How do you mitigate? And then how do you prevent? So in answer to your question about impact on everything we're doing, we would look through those 3 lenses. Yeah. I would hope that particularly around stress, depression in long-term absence, some of the results that we're seeing through specialist interventions like EMDR, we are seeing a difference, and we are seeing, you know, a positive evaluation coming back from colleagues. Part of it's that, Alison, I think part of it is actually having good conversations about people when they're in points of crisis or before that, and feeling all right to have those conversations with their line manager. So, you know, that kind of upskilling of line managers about how do you have some of those difficult conversations with colleagues, I think particularly in the front line will play a huge part in this.
Thanks for that, Katie. And in relation to exit surveys?
Yeah, I would say, put myself out there, that the return rates that we see, I think, would mirror my experience in most organisations of our size. And generally, it tends to be colleagues who either have a positive experience that they want to kind of feedback, or those that have had perhaps a less positive experience. What I would say is that all of those exit interviews that are completed, there's very detailed dashboards that are sent out to, you know, they're anonymised, etc. But so we get not only the statistical, but we also get the narrative. And so we'll take that organisational learning and make sure that it's fed back in. We do spend a lot of time with leavers, positioning the exit interview, how confidential it is, how it helps us as an organisation. So we've done a lot of work on that over the last year.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Appreciate the work that's going on.
Thanks, Alistair. Paul Leader, was that a legacy hand? Okay. Okay. In terms of our colleagues, staff associations and unions, any comments, questions at this point? Brian Jones from the Police Federation.
Thank you, Chair. Once again, I applaud the organisation for providing a dashboard which brings out the stark reality of policing day to day, and it's very helpful indeed. What we have always said is this is a further evidence of an organisation which is under significant pressure, seeing a reduction in resources across the board from the 17,234 now to 16,500. You see that Mr. Hay mentioned the fact that the majority of people was due to retireals. It's almost 50% are actually due to, from that number below that is for resignation, which we haven't seen before in this organisation. So a number of people are resigning for whatever reasons they personally have, but this raises that concern to us. And then you see the cost. So you see all the additional measures we've talked about in the first 2 parts of the agenda, about the additional welfare that's been putting in, additional looks at health and safety and well-being, yet we're still seeing a significant number of officers who are on restricted duties, presumably due to the pressure they're facing on a day-to-day basis. But that's something that we as a staff association are looking to the organisation, Police Scotland, to provide additional measures to support our members. But those figures are correlated together about an organisation under specific stress. And if we have a summer like we just had before, that then means we have a workforce who are virtually at the end of this summer virtually exhausted, because we had to introduce new shift patterns to meet those demands for those specific individuals that came to our shores.
Your points are noted, Brian, and no doubt they'll be contributing into further conversations as we go forward. Thanks for that. Stuart Carroll from the Superintendents Association.
Thanks, Chair. To develop Brian's point and also to Mr. Eadie's point regarding flexi toil re-rostered rest days that DCC Spears has also reported on, I think there does need to be that honesty and transparency that was the effort, gargantuan, that was required to deliver these operations that we know consumed a huge amount of resource whilst running business as usual, whilst running Summer City in Edinburgh, whilst running multiple other events. You know, the reality is our members were working 12-hour shifts on roster, but working probably 14-hour days by the time you take in travel, shift handovers. At worst, we had a member who worked 32 consecutive days without a rest day. Typically, most worked 11 or more days without rest days. So there is a huge effort for that, and it's how the service then returns to a normal operational rhythm following these massive operations. The service is given some latitude around flexi time and re-rostered rest days, but they have to be able to manage that. That's part of the dashboard. They have to be able to explain what that deficit is to the organisation in terms of time owed. So while there is some latitude being granted over the next few months for people to try and then now take compensatory time, to take those days back, to take those hours back, which is really helpful, the People Committee should be prepared for that upward trend in the next quarter being reported and to understand it. And I suppose to inquire, well, what are we going to do to prepare ourselves for next summer for the Commonwealth Games? And whilst it's a smaller version of 2014, undoubtedly, it still will bring with it a whole range of other challenges, through the summer. So it's how do we get ourselves into a good operational rhythm and ready to, to address that without just flick the switch, everybody onto 12-hour shifts, which tends to be the default response when we're faced with massive demand. And as I say, it's not 12 hours because you've got travel time, you've got briefing and handover times. That's just the operational necessity that we have to deliver.
Thanks, Stuart. Well, at the outset, on behalf of the SPA board and the committee members, we acknowledge the, as you described, gargantuan commitment and effort from members from not only the police staff associations, but the Unison and Unite members as well. As I'm sure you recognise, the whole workforce is involved in delivering these peaks in demand. And just to reiterate as well, we don't forget those are left with business as usual, who sometimes are left in the background, and you forget that demand's not going away either. And that's been a feature of oversight groups, for instance, and I think myself am involved in the oversight for COP26, and we see it in the work just now preparing for next year's Commonwealth Games as well. So our appreciation is there. It's a pressure that's not going to go away, and therefore those areas that we're discussing in this agenda around workforce wellbeing and health and safety, and for example, as we just heard about, become even more critical as we go forward. So I just want to reassure that these pressures that are being articulated are recognised, and that we will continue to focus our scrutiny in those areas of the organisation that seek to mitigate it. So thanks for both those contributions to yourself, Stuart, and Brian, of course, as always. Any other comments at this stage? Can I move on in the agenda? We're falling slightly behind at the moment. Moving on to the next item is around modified duties, very topical in this conversation, and the improvement plan update. Katie Miller, can I hand over to yourself?
Thank you, Chair. I might pull Nikki Page into aspects of this as well. So whilst we do deep dive on modified, I would just reiterate that modified is one part of how we resource the organisation and one part of the consideration around short-term planning, but also what we've reflected in our strategic workforce plan. So within strategic workforce plan, one of our key commitments is around creating capacity and efficiency, right people, right roles. And obviously that's in line with the Chief's vision around thriving workforce, but the absolute priority at the moment around frontline capacity and making sure that we're doing all we can to maximise that. I'll take the report as read, but summary is that as of 30th of June, all forms of modified, we're sitting at 2,553. So we have seen a general uplift trend. That's despite having focused very much on ill health retirals, etc. What I would say in section 1.7, we lay out the main considerations that we seek to fully understand when we're considering modified in its totality. The figure that I've just quoted in terms of the total number of modified, 3.1 is a very important paragraph because that actually breaks down the types, the categories of modified and the description and the number. So when we look at that headline number, yes, it's a number that we need to focus on, but actually some aspects of modified might be a positive reflection in the organisation. So for example, for protected, 158, 6.2% of modified are as a result of expectant or nursing mothers. So a risk assessment that's been done. So as we get more diversity in our workforce, so too we might expect, and we should support that number increasing. We've revisited the specific action plans that we're going to take on the back of modified, building on what we've already got in place. And that specific action plan is laid out in Appendix A. So we have laid out some very specific work stream objectives now, whereby we will be looking at enhanced data and insight to understand not only the current position, but what the improvement action is that's required. So we will start now to focus on priority areas within that 2,500 officers. And that will focus on adjusted officers, those in supernumerary posts, those who are non-deployable. So we start to differentiate between those that might be modified but are still deployable versus those that are non-deployable. We'll look at those who've been on an adjusted role for at least 3 years, and those where you've got a review date that's overdue, and that could be an op health review, it could be, you know, some sort of medical assessment that we now believe is over date. What we will do is we will look at where we get intersectionality across those principles, and that will be the first priority areas of in-depth assessment that we will undertake. So this will be a phased approach, and it will be very data-led and quite forensic in terms of specific cases. I always balance this with the fact that this is people's livelihood. These are jobs for people. They've joined the police force, committed to that as a career, and for whatever circumstance, they find themselves in a different position now. So we need to do that with sensitivity, obviously making sure within legal requirements, but making sure that, you know, we're bringing our officers with us who find themselves in these situations. Thank you.
The importance of the sensitivity around this is underlined by me. The issue, before we go to questions, it might be helpful. Is there a sense of how do we know when we get to saturation point that, you know, we're not able to accommodate modified duties, or is it just it's a case-by-case basis and you make the judgment as you go along?
It needs to be a case-by-case basis on the very nature of, for example, disability discrimination, and by the very nature of the fact that for some of our officers, particularly on recuperative, it could be a short-term recovery from an operation, and we know that that might be 8 weeks. It could be a condition that's manageable, for example, type 1 diabetes, that makes an officer modified purely just from the sense that they need time out to take their insulin injection. So they're still fully deployable, but they have a modification on their record to make sure that we adhere to that.
Thank you. Can I offer it for questions from colleagues? Angela?
Thank you, Chair, and thanks, Katie. I think the report's really reassuring, particularly the plan that you've got in the appendix, because it's quite a significant number, isn't it? 15% of the workforce that are in some form of modified duties. Just a comment and then a question was, I suppose this type of issue reinforces the need for the strategic workforce plan, and I know there's an item later on in the agenda that we might pick up on some of these things. My question was really in and around paragraph 232, and you talk about the need for a review of the roles which really require to be undertaken by warranted officers, and Skills for Justice are supporting that work. I just wondered what the projected timescale for that was, because I think that would be an important piece of work, again, not just for this element, but again for feeding into the strategic workforce plan.
Yeah, thank you. I'm actually going to bring Nikki in on this, who's leading on that piece of work, if that's okay.
Thank you, and thanks, Angela, for that question. In regards to that, we have done a piece of work with Skills for Justice to begin with, to start decluttering our environment in regards to officer role profiles. So there's different stages to the work. Stage 1 is getting a set and a suite of profiles that represent the activities that officers do. Stage 2 is to start to look then at what the differences are between, for example, the provisions in England and Wales. Which of those differences relate to differences in policing, but which of them relate to the fact that there is staff doing those roles in other areas in the country. That will then allow us to assess what the powers are that are needed in those roles, and that will ultimately lead to us being able to consider, under the wider activities of strategic workforce planning, what that means for the service and what opportunities may or may not exist. So phase 1 is in action. That's that kind of review of all the profiles just now with the business, and then we'll have a phased plan after that. So we're still working on that phasing of the plan, because there will be a requirement for further investment as well to have tools in place to do all of this work, and we will be happy to share that as we progress that journey.
Thanks for that. That's really good. And my other point was about benchmarking. You know, what lessons, if any, can we take from other forces? But that seems to be built into it. So, so thank you for that. Look forward to the update.
Thank you.
Thanks, Angela. Alistair Hay.
Yeah, thanks, Chair, and thank you very much for the report, Katie. And can I just echo, I understand the absolute sensitivities within this. I just wanted to ask two questions. First was around paragraph 1.3, you know, which is basically outlining an upward trend, and the concern is that ultimately, if this continues, this could result in insufficient deployable resources within divisions, impacting on service delivery. You know, so you're hoping to reverse the trend, understanding the sensitivities. Do you have a sense at all of if it will get to that point in the organisation where it impacts on service delivery? And then my second quick question was in relation to your high-level objectives. You know, comprehensive there, and just wondering about sufficient resources and turning those into smart objectives. Where are you on the journey with that?
Yeah, thank you. So with regards to 1.3, I think I would say that in some pockets, it is already affecting deployability and therefore capacity in the front line. So whether that is actually officers being fully or partially deployable, whether it's particular restrictions, for example, on working hours or types of work they can undertake, and or whether it's actually the resource that's required by our resource deployment unit to manage deployment of resources with restrictions. I think that generally there is a significant pull on the organisation as it stands. We've been very clear with Optima or Opt Health in terms of the assessments they're doing, that when they're doing an assessment for an officer, it is against the requirements of the post of a constable. So when we get those assessments back, we're able then to look at what that means. I think the question around manageability of this, we've put more resource into this from an HR perspective. We've got somebody who is 100% fully aligned to this project. And I guess it's the complexity of it, it's individuals' welfare, it's their well-being, this tips into family life as well, its ability to deploy at pace. You have Equalities Act legislation, you have flexible working legislation. It's a complex landscape, but I think the assurance hopefully we can give you is we know our numbers, we know what we need to do, and we've got a really clear plan in order to get to that. And apologies, I've forgotten your second question.
I'll come back to my second question just in a second. But you did, absolutely, I get the sensitivity and the complexity of this, and I do appreciate all the work that's going on at this moment in time. But it's in relation to, you did say there that this is an issue currently. It is a significant pool on resources. There's a lot of work being done to manage this. But it also says in paragraph 1.3 about this, people on modified duties, and that accommodation is impactful on colleagues, it's impactful on other members of the organisation. So in that, whilst I appreciate the bigger piece of work, could you just expand slightly on what mitigations you're currently putting in place to support those on modified duties and to support their wider colleagues and to ensure effective service delivery within the organisation? And I get how complex this is, Katie.
Yeah, I think any type of abstraction has an impact on capacity within the organisation, and whether that's modified or whether it's absence. So, when we look at kind of workforce planning, modified and the impact of modified is one aspect. You then might have leave entitlement. You then have absence, long-term, short-term. You then have, so it's almost that building block of, if you bring all of those together, what does that actually mean then at any point in time for a deployable workforce? And, and that will look different within different divisions and different specialists. We have seen areas, and hence the Chief's push for frontline capacity and building that in local policing, for example, where we know that in pockets we need to get more frontline resource. So I don't think we're ever going to move away from a position where we do not have modified officers that we are needing to support and manage. I can't see that. The nature of policing means that, this will always be the case. My colleagues who are officers will be far more able to answer this than I am. But is policing a career for life in the way that it used to be, given the demands of the role? Question, is there actually a reality, within the workforce, as we're doing our workforce modelling, where actually there's not that assumption, but you're looking at different tenure in different posts? There's different expectations of the workforce, multi-generational workforce. People don't necessarily have that same job for life in certain generations than perhaps there was before. We're seeing people coming in from second career, even third career joining us. So it's a very different workforce I think we're dealing with, and that will continue with multi-generational. I think the action plan and our ability to be able to look at the intersectionality of the principles laid out in the action plan gives us a very clear position of probably, I can't put a number on it, but I suspect several hundred cases where we would say that is our first phase one of doing a deep dive into those cases and determining what's the very specific action that's required. And that might be ill health retirement. Regrettably, even if the officer is not wanting that, there are decisions that we make as an organisation where we still might make that recommendation. It might be that actually we need to look at the adjustments that have been put in place and say they might not be reasonable anymore, given the organisation and the service we have to deliver. It might be that actually we're able to move them off modified and into a different space. So I think it's going to look different. But what I've kind of working with the team on to say is kind of what's our 400 or 500 cases that sit against those principles that we know need reviewing. And that's our start point.
Okay, thanks for that, Katie. And it is a wicked question, but it is got to be treated with the utmost sensitivity to support everybody who works within Police Scotland, and my sense is that is the approach that's been taken. My second question was really, you've laid out high-level objectives. It was just a question around sufficient resource to deliver against those and turning them into SMART objectives.
Yeah, thank you. So sufficient resource, I believe we have it. So we, as I said, we've got a full-time, it's a 6-month secondment, but a full-time secondment into the team purely to focus on modified. In addition to which, within Nikki's new team, we've created a new central case team that will also have kind of reasonable adjustments and modified in there. With regards to SMART objectives, a very good question. I might take the liberty of delegating that to Nikki and the team to turn them into SMART objectives for their performance contribution conversations. So we can certainly look at that and add some timeframes to that as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you.
Okay. We can no doubt return to this in future meetings as well around those SMART objectives, and your own input to that, Nikki, will be very important. So thank you. Colleagues from trade union staff associations. And Brian Jones from the Police Federation.
Thanks, Chair. Just once again highlights an organisation under pressure. If you look back the figures in 2016 for people who are on modified duties and see how that number has accelerated to 2025, that's a significant impact, and it's something that we've been raising. The demands of the general public hasn't diminished, it's actually got greater of the police service, so that's going to have additional demands placed on our members for a whole different variety of reasons, which then can impact on their well-being in the workplace. I think that's enough for us to say for that point, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, that's noted. Stuart Carroll.
Yeah, building on what Brian says, it's probably one of those issues that our members do lose sleep over because it seems to be growing exponentially. And typically, a superintendent in a division doing the support service delivery role will be working with HR to try and identify what are suitable, meaningful roles. And as Katie Miller has said, though, there's a lot of people who are not deployable, but they are contributing fully to the policing, mission. But it's just at what point that becomes sustainable, and the career profiles then change, where traditionally you might have moved somebody through different roles, response, community policing. They might then go to a project, or they might go to a corporate type of role or a specialist role. What now happens is there might be some effective blocking of posts or developmental posts because people are going into these posts for years with no apparent route out.
I think that's acknowledged in the importance of this work that's ongoing. The other area that's we talked about the sensitivity, the importance of sensitivity. It's also about the skills of the people having those conversations as well, making sure that members are properly professionally supported in those conversations. Okay. My proposal is that we move on and we take item 3.31 and 3.32 and then have a comfort break after that, if everyone's okay with that. So can we move on to year 2 people strategy and strategic workforce planning implementation plans, the update for that. Katie, you're down for that?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'll take the papers as read. Whilst my name is against this, as with any people strategy or strategic workforce plan, this obviously is reliant on the organisation to deliver many aspects of it. What I would say then is that within the paper at 3.3, we have laid out year 2 of the people strategy and strategic workforce plan that have been aligned to the 2030 vision and the 3-year business plan. So quite a lot of work done to make that alignment happen, given people strategy and SWP were written before 2030 vision was finalised. It demonstrates refreshed arrangements for reporting so that you can be assured in terms of where we're at. And within Appendix A, we've realigned the 136 3-year business plan milestones that are aligned with people strategy or strategic workforce plans so that we can get that very clear alignment in terms of our reporting. What I would say more broadly in relation to that is that we can see that 50% of the milestones in the 3-year business plan support people strategy deliverables and 25% SWP. And I think that comes back to my point that whilst my name might be on this paper, it's certainly not just me that delivers this. Happy to take any questions. Thank you.
It's really encouraging to see that alignment coming through as well. How do we ensure alignment alongside the policing together work, the agenda? We'll hear more about that in detail later in the meeting, but
yeah, I can see that ACC Painting is on, but we work extremely closely with her. Kat, I'm not sure if you wanted to come in on anything there.
Yeah, I was just to say, in fact, one of the kind of exception areas of highlight in our interim report, which were the committee have got for this afternoon or later in the meeting, Chair, draws out the connections to people strategy, the workforce survey, and how all of that aligns. So, and a lot of our structures at a kind of tactical and operational level are very much, you know, aligned and working together with Katie's team, even some of the work that Nikki and I both do as part of the collaboration group, so that we're really diving into the detail, particularly as it relates to culture, and particularly as it relates to some of our minoritised communities, both, you know, particularly in this agenda as it relates to our people. So really close alignment there, and I can give more on that as we go through the paper later on.
That's great. Thank you very much. It's reassuring. Other questions? Angela Leach.
Thank you. Again, thanks, Kate, for the paper, and it is great to see that alignment coming together. It's so essential for so many different aspects. So 2 questions, and again, forgive me, I'm just new to this committee, so I'm still getting my head round it all. You mention in the report that the development of the refreshed strategic workforce plan will be aided by 2 other posts that have been established, the Director of Transformation and a Head of OD, I think it was. And obviously yourself are critical players, but there's a number of others. We know that this has to be a massive team effort. Can I just ask, though, where the responsibility lies for the development of the strategic workforce plan? I just wonder if that's clear in the organisation, and as I say, forgive me if it is, I just don't know. And I'm wondering the other bit is that I know that the current plan runs to 26-27, but from what we've heard today already in other aspects of the committee's business, there are gaps in it. It doesn't really take us to address some of the wider ambitions that are in the 2030 vision. So I just wonder whether or not there's an opportunity to prioritise certain elements of it and bring those forward rather than waiting to 26-27 to be presented with an all-encompassing one, which I'm sure we'll welcome, but whether there's a more staged approach to it, really.
Yeah, thank you. With regards to who's responsible, if I can use the terminology, I hold the pen for it in terms of strategic workforce plan, but certainly not in isolation. So even development of the plan for 24 to 27, there were a number of us that worked on that. So I hold the pen, but a lot of input from stakeholders and colleagues across the board. We've committed to doing a refresh in 2026. I hold firm that a strategic workforce plan, whether that's for us or NHS or local government, actually can relatively quickly become out of date in aspects. The world moves on very quickly, and whether that's through government policy, whether it's through budget funding, etc., or best practice coming through. So we will take a review of it in 2026. And as a result of that, look at actually what we need to bring forward. I think if there's one gap, for example, that I would talk about, it is performance management, contribution management for individuals. We don't talk about it enough in the people strategy, in the version we have, but we know that for the next 6 months, that's a priority for us as an organisation to think about my career performance management, how we start to bring that to the forefront. So I hope I can give some assurance that the appendix behind the plan on a page talks to what we've done in year 1 and then year 2 and then what we've got out to year 3 at the moment, but fully recognising that we would need to either revisit those in terms of prioritisation or, quite frankly, up the ante on some of the gaps in the versions that we did pen.
So just for clarity, will there be updates in certain areas? And, you know, the performance bit was one of them. I was going to raise it under 3.4, the biannual learning and training and development. Mainly, well, I can come on to that, but I do think that there is something there that, and you're right, it's not a once and done. It is something that's much more iterative and just needs to be added to as things develop. So, but yeah, I just wondered whether or not there are elements of it that you know for sure that are going to come forward. We're in 25 just now, way before 26, 27.
I think in the performance would certainly be one in the people strategy space where there wasn't enough in there on reflection. I think in strategic workforce planning, you know, we know that we have gaps in there. We've struggled with that a little bit as an organisation. We're very good at short-term tactical planning, so resource deployment for events, etc. But it's that size and shape to target operating model, and not only the size and shape of the whole workforce, but also future capabilities and how we start to develop those. And I think there's a number of work streams in train, but I still think they're possibly more around FTE headcount alignment than they are necessarily about changing skill set and capability in the organisation and how to move forward with that.
Okay. I see ACC Patents raised their hand.
Chair, it was just to flag it might be helpful because as Katie's rightly said, you know, she holds a pen, but we all have a responsibility, you know, both as senior leaders and I guess go back to your point as well, Chair, just around the linkage to culture. I was just going to flag that it might be helpful to look at Appendix C in the Policing Together performance paper, because it shows that strategic alignment, how all of that comes together in terms of our responsibilities around the joint strategy for policing, our vision, our equality outcomes, and in particular as it relates to Katie's world around the people strategy, the strategic workforce plan and the fair work principles. But I guess that's on a page and it just shows where all of that has that interconnection. So the working relationships that we've got are critical to being able to bring that into action. But it hopefully is a good visual to show that alignment and how all of that is mapped together.
It may well be going forward at some point around this strategic workforce planning, etc. That a committed deep dive into that area would be helpful, rather than coming at the end of the line saying this is what it's been done, just shaping that. That'd be, I'm sure that'd be welcome. Okay, any other further questions at this stage, colleagues, staff associations and unions? Okay. Stuart Carr.
Yeah, just briefly, we welcome the conversations around the workforce mix. Our most recent meeting with DCC Spears and Smith was really helpful to understand what some of these specialist type roles might be going forward that we require. But just coming back again to the summer we've had, the number of officers that are modified or absent through sickness, and the chief's determination to have a force mobilisation model that we support to be able to maximise the effort in local policing, that you still are going to have to need a very, very strong base of constables, and constables tend to be omnicompetent in the sense of public contact duties, but the specialisation of lots of aspects of policing, for example, contact, command and control, clearly you need specialists there. You can't just drop constables into these roles, but ultimately when we're asked to deliver major operations, it is constables in uniform that we look for.
Thanks. The point's been noted, Stuart. Okay. Can we move on then at this stage to item 3.32, the HMICS Strategic Workforce Plan Assurance Report, and it was for discussion on that as well. It appears, Director Miller, you hold the pen for this too.
I do indeed. Again, though, not thankfully all falling on my shoulders. So when I joined, there were a number of HMICS recommendations that were inherited. And I think we'll all experience that sometimes with longevity of audit recommendations, it can sometimes get harder to close them because the context in which they were written at the time has changed and moved on. But this report really is just around assurance to show that we had 10 recommendations in relation to strategic workforce planning. We've closed 8 of those now with confirmation of discharge from HMICS. We've got 1 recommendation which relates to governance over resourcing decisions, recommendation 4, and the final one is around a governance process for areas of development, recommendation 10. So just to say that we continue to work on those 2 outstanding recommendations, and speaking with HMICS, who've been incredibly supportive in helping us with some of the evidence and thinking required in this space. Happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thanks very much. It is an update. Any points of importance that you want to raise at this time? Okay, thanks. That's noted, Katie. Can I suggest, colleagues, it's 11:47. If we take a 5-minute comfort break and come back at, if I was to say come back at 11:55, then thanks for that. be moving on to the next item. I see, Katie, you've got your hand up. Do you want to come in, or is that a legacy?
If I could just come in, if I can, just to introduce you to Ethne Graham, who will be presenting this paper. Ethne's in week 3 with Police Scotland, having joined us in HR into the new post of Head of Organisational Development.
Oh, well, real welcome to you, Ethne. So this item then is, as Debs has just kept us informed, two elements to it. So can I begin with Chief Superintendent Harvey, and then I'll come to Ethne Graham after that, and welcome her again into the organisation. So thanks very much. Louise, can I hand over to you?
Absolutely, Chair. Thank you. I'll take the paper as read, but I would like to briefly highlight a few key points in relation to learning, training and development before I hand over to Ethna for the second part, or the kind of additional, the joint approach from leadership and talent. I would like to just to pull out, nothing has changed in the paper since the paper was put in. Pull out the highlights on the 5.11 on OST, Officer Safety Training. I know that was a particular ask of a previous committee, and take questions on that obviously at the end. Secondly, reflected in our Appendix 1 is a protected time for learning, which was touched upon by Health and Safety earlier, and we have made great progress with getting this to pilot stage. So approval at the DEPS board last week. Took it to the divisional commanders meeting yesterday, and it's just got a few more I's to dot, and we'll roll out a 6-month pilot, which basically sees us given a priority focus on affording protected time for officers and staff as appropriate to undertake essential e-learning. So when we're recognising that while face-to-face training is protected and scheduled into duty management, such as our officer safety training and other courses that get held in a stat like at Tullyallen and Jackson, they're protected by scope. Our e-learning isn't, and arguably just as important, particularly where there's a legislative requirement to complete the training. So the pilot will see an additional day added on to our officer safety training days, so it will be protected and recorded on scope, and to cancel that day would be the same. It would follow the same process, a rigorous process to cancel that day, so that we're being accountable for that essential training being carried out. So I'd like to just obviously to highlight that part. So the rollout, we have A Division up in the northeast are willing to undertake the pilot for us, which we will fully evaluate with the view to rolling out in April 2026 to the full force, and we'll obviously monitor and evaluate that as we go to see its worth, and we'll monitor that on the there's a dashboard as well which allows the local sergeants and inspectors and chief inspectors etc. to see that the training is actually getting completed. And the third thing I would just pull out as a kind of key matter is just in Appendix 2, an update to our probationer training syllabus, and that we have a full training needs analysis commenced, and it's been reviewed, governed by a strategic oversight group, and the terms of reference is going to focus on 3 particular areas. So the actual probationer training programme itself, and making sure that that is fit for purpose and for modern day delivery, so that we're an employer of choice, and it's reflective of current training and delivery methods. The second area to that is our tutor constable programme, arguably just as important as the probationer training programme, to make sure that when the probationers are deployed into our local communities, that they're getting provided by the adequate support and additional learning that's required by the tutors. And the third part of that is just to have a sharp focus on our probationer governance, to make sure that we are following the regulations quickly. We are looking at officers who fail to achieve, making sure that they've got other opportunities to get on to pass their probationer training programme, and just making sure that overall governance is accountable and tight governance. So that's what I was going to pull out for the report. Happy to hand over to Ethna and take the questions thereafter.
Okay, Ethel, do you want to come in at this point?
Hi, thank you so much. Yes, week 3, it's nice to meet you all. Thank you for welcoming me. So I'm just going to speak to some of the elements of the L&T element of this thematic. The first bit that I'll pull out for you is Your Leadership Matters Phase 2 Core Development Programme. This concluded in June with all 3 summits having completed at that point. There are still some Amplify Your Impact consolidation sessions left to run. Around 69% of the eligible pool of leaders did engage with this, and that just shows such a powerful engagement number from such a challenging operational environment as well. The next few months are really going to be focused in on the short, medium and long-term evaluation of this project, specifically around the impact that it either has or has not have had. Feedbacks from this and the participants are going to be used to inform whatever the next stages of leadership development for the organisation will become. The People Manager Development Programme. This is one of the programmes that receives consistently excellent feedback from within the leadership and talent team. Around 431 participants completed that programme during this reporting period, which is really a high volume. This is only phase 1 of the People Manager Development Programme, with phase 2 and 3 looking at increasing the content and exposure for managers of different ranks and grades. At the moment, the resourcing within the team hasn't been there to accommodate that, but we are now able to begin rolling that out to some managers who have asked for support as well. So that's going to be happening very shortly as well. The evaluation points, like I said, for this programme have been extremely good, with respondents overwhelmingly agreeing that it's highly relevant and applicable in their roles as well. I would like to sort of state that the next phases of this will ensure that they're integrated with other requirements like well-being, take cognizance of strategic workforce plans and ED&I metrics as well, so that managers are equipped from the ground up during these training programmes. There's other excellent programmes that I'll not go into. I'll take this paper as read. Obviously, the Police Leadership Development Programme and the volume that have come through that, with 204 students currently on that leadership programme as well. But I think the last element that I'll draw out for particular sort of discussion is around My Career. The My Career cycle concluded on the 31st of March 2025. New cycle we're sort of in the middle of right now. We saw that 71% of the workforce engaged with the My Career process, and that's broken down in the appendix for you as well. However, only 47% of the workforce actually went on to complete this process. That tells me that the next phase of this really needs to be about simplifying the procedure for the organisation and really selling the benefits of participating within the My Career conversations, or building better infrastructure and scaffolding around performance management for the organisation, so that people can really get the benefits of participating in these conversations. I think that's all I'm going to draw particular attention to, and leave it open for questions then. Thank you.
Thanks very much. So there's a number of areas within that. Clearly, the evaluation of Your Leadership Matters is of importance to this committee. In fact, this report was delayed on the basis that we would start to get the detail of that, so we're quite eager to see what that looks like. And then and what that means for the next steps, as we get for leadership development as a whole. That I suppose the other thing you touched on, My Career, is previously commented about the over focus on it towards more towards promotion as opposed to just the general performance, etc. So those are the areas of we'd like to hear more about in the future going forward. That's of real interest to us. So on the basis of all that, board members' questions now, please. Paul, Edith.
Yeah, just picking up on the response I got to questions about re-rostered rest days, and the response was something, or it was flagged up that the various abstractions necessary to police all of the pretty major events going on in Scotland over the summer has had an impact on that. So I'm curious what impact that has on planned training, because presumably it must ride a coach and horses through planning anything like that if officers have to drop everything to go off and, you know, police the visiting of a president, or concerts or football matches or so on that's going on throughout the summer. So if we could maybe just hear a wee bit more about that, Chair.
Yeah, DCC Spears.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really valid and highly relevant question that Paul asks, and the short answer to this is that has a significant impact on training, and Luke can give more detail. So, you know, from us deploying some of our probationers who were nearing the point of the pass out parade. So we deployed an entire cohort of probationers for a 2-week period. So they will pass out from the college on Friday, 2 weeks late. And the only single piece of training that we kept in place for that period was a new intake of probationers. So other training was paused. So it has events and periods like this has a massively adverse impact on training. So notwithstanding we have now got officers who need to be trained on things that they missed in that period of time, it stretches the training team further. So I'll let Lou provide a little bit more detail, but I just wanted to be really open and honest, and this has a massive impact on our training function.
Thanks, DCC, and for the question as well. So, yeah, we had a 2-week hiatus on training across our all our training courses, aside from, as the DCC Spears said, aside from one of our probationer training courses, which we worked really hard to keep. They were brand new, started at Tullyallen. It was a priority for us, so we ring-fenced the staff to ensure that, and the accommodation actually, because a big part of the challenge for when we have a big event like this is not just about the deployment of staff, it's also about the use of accommodation across the country for the deployment of the large public order events. What I have asked to do is I've asked for some to link in, I've asked my management team to do a piece of work regarding measuring the outcome of the pause in training. So how many training courses we cancelled and what the outcome of that is, as in how quickly have we rescheduled that and what impact would that possibly have on operational delivery. And the reason I asked for that to get carried out was, and it's in progress just now, the next time the President visits, which I'm sure he may, given his Scottish connection, I want to be able to say maybe that that we don't need to pause training for a full 2 weeks, that we can perhaps pause certain aspects of it. So I've asked for that piece of work to get done, so we've got some learning, some solid evidence, I guess, to yes or no to pausing training when the future ask comes. But I am in the middle of basically assessing exactly what the impact that had on the training.
Great, thanks for that.
Thanks very much, Paul. Can we come to Angela Leach first?
Thank you once again, and really welcome the paper. Thank you for this. It's a really useful update. And a couple of questions. On the YML phase 2, which I think has been great, and the uptake is certainly reassuring. I just wondered whether, in addition to the feedback from those that had participated in it, we were going to be looking at other key measures, some of the data that might support and evidence changes in behaviour that have resulted. And I know it's really difficult to attribute, but it might give an indication of areas where there's been issues before, or it's things like sickness absence, it's things like grievance, these measures that give an indication of changes that we can take as positive. Some of the key measures that are in the people plan, I was thinking about whether or not there's an element of peer review in that, or feedback from others. And my other question was in relation to my career, and there might be a separate process, but I think for all leaders in particular, it's really important that they understand, excuse me, at the outset of a year, what is expected of them so that they can then work against that plan, and therefore performance management becomes much more proactive. It's something that they fully participate in and can get a lot from. I'm just not sure whether or not there is a process where leaders in the organisation do have an annual plan agreed with them every year that sets out the kind of key priorities that they're going to work towards, that can then be measured. And I was thinking it particularly in relation to this survey, the employee survey, Your Voice Matters, because there's a lot of things there that do need to cascade across the organisation, and that would be a key element of how you could make sure that people understood both what had to happen and their responsibility for making it happen. Thank you.
Katie Miller, do you want to come back at that?
Sorry, Ethel, did you want to come in first?
Sure, yes. Thank you, Angela. And yes, both of the questions are very well observed and absolutely accurate. I suppose Katie will add sort of additional colour to this, but for the YLM element, key measures, yeah, absolutely. And within ACC Peyton's area, there has been a culture dashboard created that it's very kindly set me up with a meeting. Sorry, week 3, I haven't seen it yet, but I'm going to be looking to see if there are any sort of metrics that can be pulled out there. Of course, there has to be recognition here that it's very difficult to attribute any of this retrospectively, but please rest assured that any additional leadership development that comes through the OD function from now on will take cognizance of key metrics in the organisation moving forward, so that we have some opportunity to look at measures of impact as well. And yes, there will be peer review of individuals who have already been invested in as leaders or with development, and their involvement in the next stages of this. I think it's crucial that we have behavioural feedback from individuals who have been invested in, who live and operate every single day with these leadership values. And I think Katie's probably going to pick up on the performance management one, so I'll stop.
Will I go to Katie and then I'll come to ACC Peyton after that?
Yeah, thank you. Angela, so we had in plan for the next 6 months to look at what our philosophy approach to performance or contribution management will look like as an organisation. I think historically my career is quite process driven. I think my career is more the tool, if you like, rather than how we approach it as an organisation. So the first step for that is Ethel and myself are running a session with the executive leadership team on Monday around what could our approach to performance management look like, because there's so many different models out there. How do we get the contextual, cultural right fit for this organisation? So very first working session with them to say, how do we reset this? What would this look like? And that would include discussions around things like objectives, performance ratings, yes, no, what's the development that sits, etc., etc. So our aim is over the next 6 months is to refresh our entire approach to performance management and bring that through the organisation.
ACC Peyton.
Thanks, Chair. And it was just to reinforce what Ethna said around how, again, this is another area that really cross-cuts the Policing Together activity and programme, and so work very closely with obviously Katie's team, but also Lou and her team in training. As you know, Chair, we've got a learning pillar as part of our Policing Together strategy, so when we pull all of that information together, we've mentioned the dashboard, but there's lots of other areas that is about the so what questions. So what is the impact of, for example, Act Don't Act training or anti-racist training? Are we starting to see reductions in areas where we want to see reductions? Are we starting to see improvements? And that's where, hopefully, as I say, and the people will discuss later, where we're going to start to see all of that coming together across kind of key metrics for our organisation.
That's really helpful. I think the significant point here to make in terms of what the role of this committee is the valuation of YLM is still to come, still to get the detail of that. But there's an acknowledgement that there needs to be improvement in it, and it might look different going forward. In terms of my career being process driven, even in the process, you still end up with less than 50% completing. So you know that there is something there about my career work, which is really important, and we'll continue to receive updates once that the proposed way ahead takes shape. It was like, you know, what's that plan look like, etc. So those are significant developments, which also shows response back to concerns that were raised by staff associations in terms of both those areas of business. Alistair Hay.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick comment on my career. Three years ago, and I remember papers coming, I remember it being launched, and there was a lot of hope for it. And it has got to a point where people feel a little bit disappointed that it's not been as successful as was hoped for, but I'm sure there's a lot of positives in it, as well as, you know, perhaps a need to separate out the different elements. So I do look forward to the insights that you draw out, and whether you develop it further or you replace it. I look forward to that. Officer safety training was something I had a question on. Encouraged at the current levels of compliance in relation to this. You know, everybody was very concerned when that had appeared to have slipped. Confidence in terms of maintaining these compliance levels with that going forward, given all the other pressures that we have heard about today and we are aware of in terms of Police Scotland. So maybe a comment around that. And then in relation to the ongoing work about you know, making sure that people are properly equipped in terms of the learning and development to fulfil the roles. You've got your leadership matters flowing through the organisation, but in the report it also highlights, you know, new superintendents, new chief inspectors, you know, development courses, etc. So I was just wondering what thought has been given to making sure that there is a synergy between all the development that takes place, again, in the context of the pressure that people have on their time.
Thanks, Alistair. I'll come in first on the officer safety training, and I'm glad that there's confidence being given with the current compliance rates. The teams and staff across the country, including the training administrators, have worked really hard to make sure that was improved and also as maintained. As a bit of additional confidence, what we've done over the courses that were cancelled or postponed during the OPRO President's visit for officer safety training, we maintained a really tight grip around that, where officers were, the training administration team worked directly with the resource deployment unit. So anybody that was postponed was rebooked onto another course. So it didn't drift. They weren't cancelled off and then not rebooked. So they were rebooked straight away. So the confidence there is that everybody has been rebooked onto a course that was cancelled for officer safety training, which will make sure that we keep that that compliance rate really high. And I'll just come on briefly before pass to see if Ethna has another comment regarding ongoing work. Regarding, you know, staff and CPD, etc. There's a real opportunity here that Ethna and I have both recognised, because we are both relatively new. So although not as new as Ethna into the organisation for sure, but I'm relatively new into my role, and Ethna and I have already had several meetings and we're committed to working together to make sure that our offering for staff is joined up and it's appropriate and it continuously develops people. And obviously, as ACC Peyton commented and mentioned on as well, we work very closely with her team as well to make sure that kind of development is given there.
Thank you.
And Sorry, I can echo that as well. We've had several meetings with it, and we understand from the Your Voice Matters, one of the key takeaways from that, or feedbacks that we received, was about staff not really being able to navigate the development that was accessible to them. So that's one of the very first areas that Louisa and I have spoken about anyway. But again, we don't have anything sort of concrete to share with the committee, but when we do, we will.
Thanks, Effie. Also, you content with that? ACC Spears, DCC Spears.
Thanks. I just wanted to emphasise one point, Chair, around the importance of officer safety training, and I made this point at the board. You know, some of the research work that we've done demonstrates that those have had, you know, there's a 40% less likelihood of an officer being assaulted within the first 3 months of them having had their officer safety training. So that for me is really significant. But to reinforce the importance of officer safety training, the force policy now, and it was a policy we reached at earlier in this year, was that officers will not be deployed if they're out of card. So I can give, you know, the board members an absolute assurance that we are not deploying any officers operationally if they have a lag in having completed their officer safety training.
That's reassuring, and thanks for that. Staff associations and unions, have you got any questions or reflections? David Malcolm from Unison.
Thanks very much, Chair. I just wanted to make a comment on well done to everyone involved in getting that officer safety training to that. Is no insignificant feat from where we were to get that to there, so that's actually quite impressive to me. I also just want to make a comment that I've been a member of police staff for 20 years. This would probably be the third refresh or possibly fourth refresh on an appraisal system that I've seen. I wish everyone involved good luck, but unfortunately my experience has been that this has always been the challenge and the place we end up, especially with police staff.
Thanks very much. No doubt, David, that your reflections have been heard by those in the call who are deeply involved in the next iteration of that design. But involving staff in co-production of these things is absolutely critical. Katie Miller, can I bring you in at this point?
Thanks, Chair. I was just going to say, with regards to my career or performance management, I don't think it's unusual for an organisation of our size and scale to actually have to have a constant focus on making something like that work. And no matter what policy, process, development, etc. you put in place, culturally there has to be an engagement from colleagues in that. So I guess it's more about culture for me, and individuals stepping forward to engage in it, than necessarily some of the process and practices.
Thanks. Any other comments at this stage? Brian from the Police Federation.
Yes, thanks, Chair. No, we welcome the developments regarding probationer training, chief of constable training. Also in the margins, they're talking about first line managers training and second line managers training, and hopefully we can get back to that holistic position of face-to-face and not online, because that's where you live, learn and share ideas together. So that's all very positive. Like our colleagues in Unison, yes, we'd love to see an appraisal system for Police Scotland, because we've never actually had one from day one, which obviously has additional impacts on performance regulations and the like, as a fact they can't be invoked until we have got that appraisal system in place. But that will then identify or let the organisation develop, ensuring that colleagues are spoken to and assisted throughout the year on their progress as an officer, or in the case of Malcolm, his colleagues and staff.
Thanks for that. Right. Okay, any other comments at this stage? Thanks, that's a significant paper there. What I'm encouraged by is the acknowledgement of the work that's ongoing from our colleagues and staff and trade unions there. And best wishes to both of you, Louise and Ethna, in terms of recently coming into these roles, and thanks for the endeavour to take that forward. Moving on then to 3.5, which was an area of concern, previously reported police driver training update, please.
Thank you. Thanks again, Chair. And again, I'll take the paper as read. I anticipate whatever questions will come after that. I'll pick out a couple of highlights. Obviously, it's a I believe a well-versed topic at this committee. So just wanted to provide the reassurance that under my new management, we have set up a driver training strategic oversight group for which we've got a number of key stakeholders involved. So not just from a training aspect of it, because I understand that's just one part of it, but how that training aspect affects our operational colleagues. So they're key stakeholders in armed policing, roads policing, and also the local divisional commanders for the areas where we're deploying to. But in addition, we also have colleagues from health and safety coming to it, and also the Federation and staff associations. And it's just for that transparency, so everybody can see what we're doing as an oversight group to ensure training courses align with operational requirements and are legislatively compliant. So we're going to oversee driver training delivery as part of that strategic oversight group from now on, and as I said, legal and our health and safety colleagues are represented within it, and then we'll troubleshoot any issues as they come along. The importance of liaising with our colleagues at local policing divisions is really important to ensure the number of standard response driving courses, so those that are trained with emergency response privileges, but with some limitations compared to our advanced driver, but basically those that routinely answer our 999 calls. We link in really closely with local divisions to ensure that training is prioritised based on several factors, so geographical location, and demand. We appreciate that officers who are working in remote rural areas are given precedence sometimes over because of the unique demands of their operational environment. But the allocation remains flexible and it's carefully balanced with those that work in urban environments to make sure that we're maximising the courses that are getting delivered. And again, under the strategic oversight group, we continue to work closely with those in armed policing and roads policing to ensure that we're servicing the demand that's generated there as well. I know it's all in the paper. I'm happy to answer any questions though, Chair.
That's an encouraging update, Louise. Thanks for that. Can I offer, is there any questions? There is a detailed paper on it. Okay, that's noted. And reflections or comments from staff associations. Brian Jones from the Police Federation, please.
Yes, thanks, Chair. Glad to see the development here regarding driver training, but if I go back to the paper that was presented back in February, we had numbers raised by Alan Gibson, Chief Superintendent, now retired, which gave the transparency of where we actually were sitting on the training demand for standard response driving courses, advanced driving courses, and the training for armed policing. So I'd appreciate if those figures were then brought back to the board so we could actually see where those numbers currently are sitting across the area. I'm glad to see that the paper highlights the number of driving instructors that we have across the board, but the committee be aware that there has been a change in legislation regarding the police prescribed driving regulations, which puts additional burdens on instructors themselves and their qualifications to make sure they meet legislative requirements. So it'd be interesting to see if all the civilian staff driving instructors have got that advanced training package under their authorities, or if they have to go through additional training to receive that area, because we know that's been raised before by colleagues in MPCC. But as I say, there is progress here, Chair. You and I have spoken about this personally off table about our concerns, but I'm glad to see the force are now looking at that and try and get some form of development here.
Just before I go back to Chief Superintendent Harvey, what I'm comforted by is the strategic oversight at an operational level, which no doubt all the points that you're raising will be challenged to look at in detail. Chief Superintendent Harvey, in terms of those the provision of that data, is that an issue? Are you able to update on that?
I'm not able to update on it directly here, Chair, at this time, but I can bring it back. I would be in fear of giving you false data. It's not updated to my fingertips, if that makes sense. But if that's a request, I can bring that back to the board. I'm also linked in with Brian on a regular basis, so we can chat about that off table certainly too. But and just in relation to the regulations that Brian touched on, so that you've got some comfort that legal, as I said, legal services are part of the strategic oversight group. And addition to the strategic oversight group, I ask legal on a regular basis for their kind of advice, and so that I can work through all the regulations and make sure that we're compliant. And that's a process that's ongoing. So there's a bit of reassurance there that we are making sure that, and if it's identified that our driving instructors need additional training, additional time, contact time, etc., then I will work towards a resolution for that.
Okay, thanks for that. And if you can, in due course, provide an update in a future meeting in terms of those the numbers, etc., that would be helpful. Okay. Thanks very much. I'll bring this item to a conclusion, and we move on then to 3.6, which is the annual fair work assessment. Director Miller.
Thank you, Chair. I'm actually going to bring Nikki Page in to talk to this paper if I can. Thank you.
Afternoon, Chair. Afternoon, colleagues. So I think everyone has a good understanding of fair work, and I'll take the paper as read. Just to kind of recap on how we've got to where we've got to. Scottish Government obviously set out their strategic ambition in terms of the convention. They then produced an action plan, and then after that, guidance. In 2023, we commissioned an assessment of fair work internally, and that resulted in us having 52 actions that we've been looking to embed into our strategic work plan and the work that's ongoing, as you would anticipate. You would want us to take that Scottish Government ambition and make sure we achieve that. We've done that through the golden thread of fair work, goes through our people strategy, our strategic workforce plan, our policing together strategy and the plans thereof. So that's how we've sought to embed it rather than have a separate work stream on it, so as that it's in everything we do, it's in our thought process. The themes are voice. And as you can see, we've done a lot in this space in regards to Your Voice Matters, and we've spoke about that today. Opportunity, we have spoke about reward framework and various leadership aspects in this meeting. So all of these different elements feed in to our ability to give members assurance in this area. So I've brought the paper, I have brought the action plan. I'm hoping that you can see, certainly from page 3, 2.3, that progress is getting made across all of the areas. There's still work to do because it is strategically embedded, but I think it's really starting to embed and form lots of thought in this space. It's certainly subject of lots of dialogue in regards to partners as well. There is a commitment, obviously, to ensure that trade union membership is something that we promote as well organisationally. So it's an important one for our colleagues on this call as well, in regards to their role in assisting us to help embed the principles here. And I would like to thank colleagues on the call who have been actively involved in different aspects of this work to achieve that. So I'll stop there and take any questions, Chair.
Thanks very much, Nikki. Any questions for Nikki? Alistair? Alistair Hay?
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Nikki, for the report. Huge amount of work has been undertaken, and it looks, I'd be interested to hear from staff side colleagues, and I know they've been active participants in much of this, but it looks like significant progress has been made. It strikes me that this will be an ongoing journey, as opposed to, as the world around us changes, as opposed to task and finish. So what's the balance between delivering on the objectives and maintaining Scotland always has a fair workplace?
So I think fair work is something that is constantly evolving because it evolves with society and expectation of workers as well. So I think in the first instance, it's ensuring that our proposition is still attractive. and that the support mechanisms for our workforce are in place and embedded. We've spoke about a lot of our, how do we lead in contribution or performance management. All of these things lead into that fair work, because it's about engagement, and fair work is a two-way process. Fair work is about our offering to individuals who are committing their labour to us, but it's equally about that providing for the public by providing meaningful roles and opportunities for people to engage and deliver a meaningful career. So I think we are uniquely enabled in policing to deliver on both those aspects, and all the work that we spoke about today leads into that engagement and hopefully gets that balance between fair work for an individual and what we deliver in terms of that work, which is really about serving the public. So I think it really fits hugely, it's hand in glove for what we are trying to achieve anyway as an organisation.
No, thanks for that, Nikki, and you've drawn it out there in your response, and also when you were setting out the paper. So much of what's in this paper, you said it's strategically linked. We've spoken about it today, so I'm encouraged by that. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Alistair and Nikki. Angela Leach.
Sorry, Chair. Yeah, thanks, Nikki. I thought this was a first-class report compared to work that I've seen in other organisations. I thought the comprehensive nature of this paper was absolutely brilliant, and it really brought so many different strands together. So well done to everybody involved. I just wondered whether or not you wanted to say anything about the assessment, bearing in mind the results that will emerge from the 2025 Your Voice Matters survey, and how that might inform future iterations of the work plan.
Yeah, so the assessment obviously is, we've got a position statement against each of the elements that we had committed to working forward. I think this is part of our journey and being able to demonstrate that we're making a difference, that's outcome led, that we're expecting change and we're monitoring of that and how we're achieving that. So there's a lot of elements of dashboards, and us actually being able to evidence progress within this. And that's why I do say it's a journey, because those that would have been involved in this dialogue a couple of years ago would have been like, well, how does this fit? So I'm hoping that the assessment is far more transparent in terms of the areas of work that links into each area of the ambition and where we're at with that, including in terms of monitoring of data and the evolution of our understanding and insights. So I think there's still work to be done in various areas. There's loads of further areas that we're going to have to draw out as we do further assessment. And we will always have to, and I said at the start, fair work does evolve with our workforce. So those temperature checks that we're already committed to in terms of voice and that have to inform further iterations and our direction of travel as well as we go through this, because this is a strategic assessment, and you would anticipate that further assessment is embedded into our revision of strategic workforce plan, people strategy, policing together strategy, and that we're always linking that up and keeping fair work as that backdrop as well to our thinking, as well as that kind of organisational review and benchmarking of policing. We would expect to be guided by Scottish Government as well in terms of their ambitions. So it is about drawing all of that together and making sure it's complementary. Does that answer your question, Angela?
Yeah, no, that's great. I think, yeah, in the paper and what you've said, Nikki, you've captured the links really, really well, and it's very evident what you're doing. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for that, and thanks for the answer, Nikki. Colleagues, staff associations, unions, is there any comments, reflections you wish to contribute at the moment? Okay, it seems to be quite universally received, and no doubt there'll be further engagement with staff associations, etc., in developing it. Can we move on then to the next report? Is a biannual Policing Together update, ACC patent. Please, thank you.
Thanks, Chair. And just a couple of points for me to set it in the context before opportunity for feedback, because the primary purpose of this report is to seek some feedback in relation to the new structure, because this is the first time we've reported in this way. As you know, Chair, we have a responsibility to report on our equality outcomes and our mainstreaming of them, and we did that back in April, and we will continue to report progress on them through this board as we do every 6 months. But as you know, within that world, we have done a lot of work to pull together both our Policing Together strategy, our equality outcomes, and a whole range of activity, whether that's from inspection reports, audits, recommendations and actions, into one place so that we can start to really tangibly understand where we are focusing our attention and crucially the impact that that's having. So this report, as I say, primarily has been pulled together because it incorporates all those elements, and we're really keen to get your feedback to see if it's starting to work towards what allows you as a scrutiny committee to understand both progress and critically impact. The report itself, as you'll see, we have done, as I say, a huge amount of work to map and align all of the various recommendations and information that we've held, whether that's been from our human rights baseline assessment, our sex, equality and tackling misogyny action plans, our IRG reports, HMICS inspections and our BDO audit, all into one place, which is our tracker and is included in the report. But the main kind of themes, it starts off with a high-level summary. We then move into the mainstreaming, so we give a kind of thematic overview, and there's kind of 5 areas in the report that we've touched on. We're drawing out some of the information on the dashboard, and of course that's continuing to be under development. It just went live in April, and we're continuing to consider through my performance and tasking group the measures and metrics that we would want to record, but we're given an example of that in this report. As I mentioned, the wider tracker that captures all of our progress towards the very many recommendations and actions we have in this space. And then there's a section at the end that will be the exception report. Now, this report doesn't have exceptions in it because it is just a draft to give you a sense of that format. But the next report in October will have that. There was a couple of exceptions that were drawn out in my performance and tasking that we're exploring a bit further, but felt it was a bit premature to put them here. But it gives you a sense of how we're going to bring all of that together and hopefully add some real rich information, both data and qualitative, to hone in into the progress that's been made here. But I'll pause there and happy to take any questions, and definitely keen to get that feedback on the structure of the report. Yeah, and in the context, there's the Policing Together oversight group is this week as well, so we'll get further discussion on it at that. Offer it for questions at this time. The in terms of the cultural dashboard data coming into it and the characteristics around that, in terms of that analysis of that and insight from it, how do you see that developing? Thanks, Chair. Yeah, so that's a key focus at our performance and tasking group that I chair, and that's where we look through, we get a very specific report from our analysts who ahead of that meeting review the data that's contained, and as you know, the real positive around that culture dashboard is that we do have access to a whole range of information in the one place, whether that's from our PSD systems and our HR systems. they do the work in advance and then bring that to us with that exception reporting, as we've mentioned, so that we start to see where are the areas of disproportionality or areas where we feel that we really need to consider more. And crucially, Chair, I guess what came out of the meeting the last time, it becomes a so what. So what do we need to look at in a bit more detail, but also what are we asking our staff and our leaders and raising across an organisation. So very much supported with a communication plan. There's a number of metrics, as I say, that we're looking at that we would want to consider as a starting point. And again, you'll see more of that when we come into the November reporting.
Thanks for that. Alistair Hay.
Yeah, thanks, Chair, and thanks, Kat, very much for the report. It's a significant report, and it's quite comprehensive. My feedback on it is this is a very complex area. There is a lot of interdependencies, not always with areas that are obvious in terms of the relationship with policing together. So I think there's been a really good attempt to actually draw out the interdependencies across the organisation. As a scrutiny body, we really want to know, well, what was the position when we started, and where are we now, and therefore has the effort that's been put into it been impactful? And I think by and large, this report does speak to those areas, but I would just like to see a little bit strengthening where it's appropriate in terms of baseline and where we are now, and then impact as you develop this, as you go forward with the rest of the plan over the period up to 2026. Hopefully that's helpful.
That's very helpful, and yeah, I agree. I think there's something about that kind of overview of exception. The dashboard does that, and you can go into so many different areas, but that's why, those metrics that will allow you to say this is where we were. We've drawn a few out when you look at, for example, representation, and you can see that we are increasing representation, for example, but it's probably just putting it in a visual way that helps bring that to life.
Yeah, thank you.
Are there any other questions at this moment for ACC Payton? Before we come to trade unions and officials, if you allow me, ACC Payton, this will be explored further in the Policing Together oversight group this week. But recent media coverage regarding the work of the independent reference group around Policing Together and the report on the deep dive into misogyny and the allegations, the public allegations of, in some ways, burying that report. But there clearly was the publication, and I'm reporting this at the board in due course, of the IRG's report, which referenced that work and what was going in there. Is there any public comment you can make in that at this stage for the record in terms of transparency and openness? Because we have obviously concerns amongst staff associations and trade unions as well.
Okay, thanks, Chair, and thank you for the opportunity to make a comment. I guess the one thing that I would say right from the outset is the inference that was placed in the paper was, of course, that there was a report that was buried, which would give an inference that we were in some way not wanting to share that information. And I think it's really important to put on public record that, Police Scotland has been the most open and honest and transparent organisation, both in policing and across public sector, in terms of acknowledging and indeed accepting that we are institutionally discriminatory and institutionally racist, and therefore that commitment to moving to becoming anti-racist and anti-discriminatory. Alongside that work and the visibility of all of that work and the structures that have been in place, we have been, in part of the performance report that we've just touched on, references the various numbers of reports, inspections, human rights baseline inspection, IRG reports, HMIC culture reports, and ultimately all of that have resulted in the progress and the activity that we've identified. The report that is referenced, and we'll touch on it more tomorrow, what I would say and what I would give assurance to this group is the 30 recommendations are all in line with our, we're in line with the work that our Sex, Equality and Tackling Misogyny working group were leading on in the action plan, and again have been mapped into our wider trackers so that we can continue to make sure that we're making the progress that we need to. And I said right from the outset, Chair, in taking on this portfolio, we need patience and perseverance in this space to see the progress that's been made, but certainly it would be inaccurate and, from my perspective, really misleading to say that the organisation would in any way try to hide information. I think, as I say, we've been really clear, and the Policing Together strategic oversight group that you chair is the means by which we bring that work visibly to the fore.
Yeah, thanks for that position. I appreciate it, and we will no doubt return to this inside the Policing Together oversight group, and I will report that to the full SPA board in due course. Could I offer it now for any comments or reflections from the staff associations and unions? Okay, I appreciate that. Can we move on then to the next item, which is similarly very important, is 3.8, discussion regarding the Supreme Court ruling on sex and gender, and it's still for yourself, ACC Peyton.
Thanks, Chair, and apologies if you can hear pipes in the background, but there's a member of staff leaving, so sorry about that. But yeah, again, just for the benefit and the context, I'll obviously take the paper as read, but as you know, Chair, the sex and gender work which commenced last September, we report into ordinarily into the Performance Committee and did that both in December and June of this year. But crucially, of course, for this committee, there are elements of that work that have a focus around our people. And so we felt helpful to bring the paper to this group just to touch on two of those key areas. The report sets in the context of why we've been doing this work and the work that's been progressed today, and the flexibility with regards to our structure, which has continued to develop as we've continued to look at and respond to, for example, the Supreme Court judgment earlier this year. And the report draws out the kind of three main areas that we have a focus on, both around data standards and recording search and single sex spaces. The paper gives an update in detail just around our search, which we had issued that guidance and it was obviously discussed at the last board meeting in June. Also, since that board meeting, we have issued guidance as it relates to single sex spaces on the 7th of August. And the further work in relation to our data standards, having been through a wider stakeholder engagement event and ethics panels, we will be reporting back through DCC Spears' board and through back to the Performance Committee come September. So the paper's there, I'll take it as read, but happy to pause, Chair, and take any questions.
Thanks for the update. It's a hugely important area for us, particularly in the People Committee, and the issuing of guidance is welcome. Any questions or further comments from members on this? Alistair?
Yeah, thank you for that. First question is you've issued this new guidance, and I know it's very early days, but in terms of the practicality of implementing it, at this early stage, do you have any reflections and what's your thoughts and plans to evaluate its appropriateness and effectiveness in the medium to long term? My second question was in relation to the Scottish Government Code of Practice in terms of stop and search, which I think is at in paragraph 3.14. So it won't be until 2026 that that's updated. And it's what primarily governs us for you. Your thoughts on the timing of that would be helpful. And in relation to facilities, your dignified facilities within premises, relationship with the estates strategy and the challenges that we have around the current condition of the estate across Police Scotland. I would appreciate your thoughts on that.
Thanks, Alistair. So starting with the guidance, I'm guessing you mean the search guidance in the first instance then, and I suppose just by way of reassurance, we've had no complaints in relation to the guidance since it's been used. We know that it has been used, but as I say, we have had no issues. And I think just to put that in the wider context, Alistair, since 2019, you know, policing in Scotland has only had one complaint as it relates to the searching of transgender people. So actually that's the context that we're operating in, but certainly we've had no complaints. In relation to the Code of Practice, our team are obviously well engaged with Scottish Government on the review of the Code of Practice, which as you know is due for publication early 2026. Whilst of course there's elements for us in policing around urgency, around clarity, I think given that we're still operating in a very dynamic landscape, not just in terms of Scottish Government, but Equality and Human Rights Commission and some of the ongoing JIRs, etc. that's in that space. I think in many respects, as we work towards that, we will hopefully have greater clarity across the board, but we're very much engaged in that work. And your final point around the facilities, I'll just draw out that that's the single-sex space is a piece of work that Nikki chairs and she's on the group, but just for reassurance, that's absolutely aligned to the work that ACC Mark Sutherland leads around our estates, and therefore, whilst in the short term we're very much relying on an understanding of where we might want to prioritise facilities that are perhaps not available. There is work ongoing with our estates who are doing an options appraisal to understand what we would want to consider in a prioritised way, and we should be getting that options appraisal in the next few weeks. So it's all joined up and it comes through Nikki and into our wider strategic oversight board, Alistair.
No, thank you for that, and I'm appreciative of the approach that you're taking on all of this and the responses to these specific questions. Thank you.
Thanks, that's appreciated. Any questions or reflections from us, staff and union colleagues? Okay, so we'll take that paper as noted and acknowledge it. Now, item 4 was on the agenda as a forward look, and it was the intention to develop a work plan for the committee so we've got clear understanding what papers are coming and looking ahead, and we can work to that. That work is still ongoing, and we'll mature that. It has to be consulted upon with those who have to contribute by actually delivering the papers. So that's something that will develop in the future. That brings us to the end of the items considered in the public session. We've